I think for me, the most devastating loss was the loss of the light fixtures in the Blacker House, the famous Green and Green in the Oaknall area of Pasadena. One afternoon, we received a call at Pasadena Heritage from an unknown person. To this day, I don't know who it was, who said that the new owner was stripping the house of its light fixtures. And indeed, it turned out that he removed 65 light fixtures and the front door. And he took some of those light fixtures back to his farmhouse in Stonewall, Texas, and the others, some he put in the antique market for sale. And we were truly horrified that such a thing could happen, but because of course in a Green and Green house, Charles and Henry Green designed the fixtures specifically for the space and the house, and it all works as a unit. And the idea that anyone would take all those fixtures out was just devastating to us. So we then embarked on a long campaign to see if we could talk the owner, the new owner, Barton English his name was, into returning the fixtures to the house. But he was uninterested in returning any of them to the house. And he also refused to back off from his plan to remove the front door, which was also one of those beautiful Green and Green doors with all that gorgeous stained glass artwork. He replaced it with a replica, and we suggested to him that we appreciated his making a replica, but why didn't he take the replica and leave the original one in the front door? All of those arguments fell to naught. Then subsequently the Blacker House passed to another owner, and then to its current owner, and I'm very pleased to say that the current owners have truly restored the house, which is a spectacular Green and Green. I think the finest Green and Green in our city, but I'm a little partial. The interesting thing was that the local newspaper columnists were uninterested in this issue because this was a private property matter, and didn't I understand that, or didn't we, Pasadena Heritage, understand that? And they weren't particularly interested in covering it, although there was some little bit of coverage, but not much. The neighbors were impatient with us. Many of them were very impatient with us because we were interfering with private property rights. So what happened is I called Giorgio Giovannini, who had been an architectural critic with the Los Angeles Herald Examiner, and that paper was no longer, and Giorgio Giovannini had moved to the New York Times and was living in New York. So I called him and said, I know you will understand, because he knew Pasadena Heritage and he'd been on our tours. And I said, I know you'll understand, couldn't you help us and write a column or write an article or something in one of your articles? He said, I'll do it. And he wrote a really wonderful article about the horrors of stripping houses of important architectural artifacts. And what we didn't know is that this was an issue that was actually happening around the country, particularly with Frank Lloyd Wright houses. So we just sort of raised the whole dialogue, and there were articles in newspapers across the country about the Blacker House and other homes that suffered the same kind of stripping. And I had at one point, I counted up 82 different articles that appeared in newspapers across the country on the Blacker House and related issues. The National Trust had a special workshop just on that at one of its conferences, and there was a great discussion among museums about whether they should take artifacts that are removed from houses in this manner. And some museums were very upfront in saying, no, we absolutely won't take them. We don't want to facilitate or encourage this kind of stripping of historic homes. We would not take them. That will be our policy. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York did take some of the fixtures, and in fact I did see them there once. It was very disappointing and discouraging to me to see them in big glass cabinets with a lot of other artifacts, none of which really had any context to them.
Even his own family members in Chicago were appalled at his having done this, and then his digging in his Texas boot heels,
right,
to completely resist any pleas to return these fixtures.
Right.
I'm surprised to hear that you said that you thought maybe the current owners had been successful in getting some of these back. But what needs to be said, just to augment what you've already said, Claire, is that the current owners, where they had to replace missing fixtures or missing stained glass windows, have had employed craftspeople who have been able to work and achieve the level of craftsmanship that was embodied in the original fixtures designed by the Greens. And the archival materials from the Greens' work still survive, which obviously gave them a great basis for doing something as accurately
good
as
point.
possible.
Just to add one little story about the drama of those times, although we had many neighbors who thought we were out of line in expressing such concern about private property, there were neighbors who understood and were concerned and would call us often anonymously. And the replicas of the front doors, it's actually a three-part front door panel, the replicas were being built inside the house,
In the basement.
in the basement, and then moved up into this beautiful, huge entry hall that you walk into. And certain people at certain times peered in windows and were able to see that this was happening inside the house. So there was a network of watchdogs in the neighborhood trying to figure out when they were actually going to swap out the original front doors for the replicas. We knew the replicas were being built. We didn't know when the originals would be removed, and it actually happened at 2:00 in the morning. I received a phone call. By the time I got my jeans on and got over there, they were already crated, trucked, and driven away, and the new doors were up. And they are beautifully made, I have to say. So if you didn't know that was happening, you might never have caught on for some time that the original doors were gone and the replicas were in place. So they were well aware of the level of angst in the community, and we did have a number of people watching out for that event to happen, but it was certainly a sad moment.
As part of the background, it was the ultimate purchaser, Barton English, whose name will live in infamy in Pasadena, who had been advised by a prominent antique dealer who specialized in the arts and crafts, and was given to understand that probably the value of the fixtures that could be removed exceeded the purchase price that he had paid to the longtime owner. Here was a property, ripe for picking, and also I was there at the next National Historic Preservation Annual Conference, and the session that Claire mentioned was packed. There were hundreds of people who had heard about this, who were attending the conference and came to attend that workshop. There was a panel
It was
discussion.
fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
And Barton English was part of the panel. But he was just, stubborn and uninterested. I met him in the elevator going up.
That must have been a moment.
That was a moment.
Well, maybe
enough of that.
the end of that story, though sad as it was, as Claire mentioned, the house today has been incredibly restored, and the current owners could not possibly be taking better care of it. But also the aftermath led to revisions in the Pasadena zoning code that put some special protections in place for green and green designed homes. It isn't perfect, but it certainly helps to feel that there's some higher level of scrutiny and a process that would have to be followed. And I think people who buy green and greens today go in knowing that they're buying a total package. So that kind of wholesale stripping could not happen again.